Hi, I'm Bob Batcher, Executive Director of Prime Plus Senior Centers, and this is Prime Time with Bob. And every now and then I get a chance to talk with somebody that I used to talk to on Norfolk Perspective. And Seth, you're one of them. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's good to be in conversation with you again.
I know it's been a long time. We are in a very special exhibit at the Chrysler Museum of Art, although all your exhibits are special. And you got a great gift shop too. We got to throw that in, right?
Absolutely.
What's the exhibit that you're standing in front of?
So I'm standing in Alma W. Thomas, Everything is Beautiful, which is a major exhibition on retrospective of the artist Alma Thomas, an artist who was born in Columbus, Georgia in 1891 and lived until 1978 in Washington, D.C. The show spans her entire artistic career and a variety of creative interests. And I think the highlight are paintings like what you see right behind me, these enormous 6-foot-tall, colorful abstractions with dabs of color that really pop off the canvas. And it's a delight to see, and we just opened it, and I can't wait for people to join us.
I know it's going to be exciting. Now, the reason I know that is, as the Chrysler often does, you really ask the community to come together and help how to present this piece, this exhibit, because it's really a special exhibit. And we're going to see why in a bit. And you happen to invite me, so we reacquainted. The thing that really impressed me now that I'm working in a senior center is that if you have the privilege of having a long life, there's going to be a multiple of labels put on you. And Alma had a variety of labels. I saw, for 40 years, close to that, she was an educator, middle school art teacher, which I usually got thrown out of those classes. So, I was encouraged to do art appreciation, which I appreciate this art. And then she went on to be a painter, and then a civil rights advocate, and then an international painter, right?
That's right. Alma Thomas led a very long life and had many interests over the course of her life. She was African-American woman born in the South, moved to Washington, D.C., and became a teacher, a school teacher. She was an educator for more than 40 years. She taught in one classroom in DC at Shaw Junior High School for 35 years. And while she was teaching, she was developing her artistic career as a painter and what was very popular at the time as a marionette artist as well. She was also involved in civil rights in different ways and in social activism through her church. She was active as an artist, but she got a lot of recognition later in life. So she, in 1966, she has a first retrospective at Howard University. But then in 1972, she has a much larger, a sort of more recognized exhibition at the Whitney American Art Museum. She's the first African-American woman to have a solo show at the Whitney Museum. And the room that I'm standing in is a partial reconstruction of that exhibition. We have 7 large canvases just in this space alone, and they show a person who at 81 years old is getting national and international recognition for a lifetime of efforts and creativity.
Hey, I know you're a good-looking guy and everything, but what do you think? Through high technology, should we flip the phone?
I would love it. There's so much more.
Oh, there's a hand. All right. We spared no expense to do this show, Seth. Can you tell?
I can tell. So what you're looking at right now are a series of paintings that she made largely about Mars. She would often say that she was born in the horse and buggy days, but she was fascinated by mobility and movement. And what you're seeing on the wall are images that she made right when the Mars orbiter was sending back imagery from its first mission to record what the surface of Mars looked like. And for those people who remember, when the Mars orbiter was circling Mars, there was a huge cloud storm. For 4 months, there was a cloud storm. So they weren't able to send back useful imagery for NASA. But Alma Thomas saw this imagery and thought it was revelatory. There was color and movement and reflection and refraction, and she used that as the inspiration for an entire series of work. As you scan the room, let's go this way, you can see several paintings that she made as well as garments that she wore. The dress that you see there is one that she had made for her opening in order to complement the paintings. So she wouldn't exactly match them, but she would complement them.
Oh, wow. Now, Seth, she also made clothing, though, didn't she, in part of her career?
She did. You know, her earliest activity as an artist was actually as a costume designer. After several years of teaching art in Delaware, she went back to school. She went to Howard University to study in the home economics department, to study clothing design because she wanted to work in the theater. But while she was there, based on the quality of her designs, the newly formed art and art history program tapped her and invited her to become their first student. So she had many accomplishments in her life, but one of them is that she was the first student from Howard University to graduate with an art degree.
Wow. Now, okay, just to put in perspective, was she a tiny woman or is that a giant picture painting?
So it's a giant painting. She was 5'1". And so she was not particularly tall, and she was working on canvases that were sometimes as much as 6 feet tall. And when we go around the corner, I'll show you some paintings that really show the accomplishment of someone who is in their 70s and 80s, who in her case was really suffering from arthritis, but able to manipulate these enormous canvases in her own home, which was a very tiny space.
Oh, wow. Let's go around the corner.
All right.
And while we're going around the corner, you know, you brought up something because quite often I'll hear people over here at Prime Plus saying, I can't do. I have a feeling she didn't have a can't do.
She definitely did not have a can't do. She oftentimes would describe her ability to overcome things. And in fact, her friend, the artist Jacob Kanan, and you can see one of the paintings by her friend Jacob Kanan in what you're looking at now. It's the portrait on the left with the blue background, the woman in the sort of chartreuse or green dress. Jacob Kanan would oftentimes describe Alma Thomas as suffering. He would say she was really hurting. She had these physical limitations that were very frustrating for her. But when Alma Thomas would describe it, she would say, I don't let things get in my way. I see light, I see joy. And so she had a very optimistic perspective and just wouldn't let inability or limitations hinder her.
I stole that because I call that the spirit of Prime Plus. So, whoa. Forgive me.
That's good. So I mentioned that she worked in a very small space, and what you're looking at here is a sort of diorama where we've recreated a lot of the things that she had in her home. She had a chair exactly like this one. This is a house dress that she wore to paint in. There's a portrait of her by another artist right above the chair. There's one of her paintings above the lamp. You can see a marionette sort of low down in the diorama. She was a marionette artist. She worked in clay. And up the very top, you can just make out there's a little, there's a mobile that she made that she hung in her home, and we discovered it for the exhibition. So we were glad to be able to include it. The home that she lived in was in Washington, D.C. on 15th Street, and was pretty small. And so we know from looking at photographs that she had to kind of wedge herself into the space in order to paint these enormous canvases. She wouldn't have been able to lay them out very easily. She oftentimes worked with them on her lap, and then she would stack them up against the wall. Again, she didn't let that get in her way. She sort of found creative ways to adapt and to work with the limitations that she faced.
Wow. Seth, let me ask you, we talked about the labels of life. You've studied Alma a lot.
Yeah.
How would you say she would define herself?
She would define herself. It's interesting. You have to remember, maybe we can actually go over here and look at some of these ones.
Yeah, let's. We're short on time. I know you don't want to show the whole exhibit because we want people to come and see the rest. And oh, there you are. Okay, cool. Oh, wow.
So she was making work in the 1960s and 1970s. And you have to remember that this is the moment of the rise of the Black arts movement and the Black power movement. And there are many artists who are making works about Black consciousness and works that directly address themes of social justice. And so Alma Thomas, who was more senior than many of those artists, was oftentimes asked don't you want to be considered a Black artist? Don't you want to be considered an African-American artist? And she would very much resist the labeling. She would say things like, I want to be considered an American. I want to be considered an artist. And this was largely because of her own politics, which were not activist politics per se. They were much more about social uplift and social justice through reform. As I say, she spent 35 years in a single classroom. And so for her, uplift really meant education, working with community, and making a better environment for everyone around her.
Yeah, I know you're heavily produced there and you actually have a camera person. Can you kind of into the right a little bit so we can get a teaser? There we go. Oh, wow. So it's a huge exhibit. Now, I guess, can we see Seth again? What do you think? Should we put Seth back on? There he is. I'm going to ask you the consummate question. She was the first African-American painter to have a major exhibit. Was she the last?
No, absolutely not. She certainly was a trailblazer in many ways. The Whitney exhibition, which is one of her most highly regarded exhibitions, certainly started a trend there, and it was actually part of a series of exhibitions that focused on African-American artists at the Whitney. There had been a few others that focused on men, so she was the first woman, but she was absolutely not the last. The issues around representation, though, are ongoing, and so museums are very much in this moment now of asking questions about representation of artists in the collection, the kinds of exhibitions that we're doing, even things like staffing and who is on the staff and who's working at institutions, cultural institutions.
Seth, you studied Alma, you fell in love with Alma, you had to get her stuff there, but why did the Chrysler, besides you are the most influential man there, why did the Chrysler decide to have this exhibit?
Well, so actually the exhibition came about through a partnership. So the Columbus Museum in Georgia, where Alma Thomas spent the first 15, almost 16 years in Columbus, Georgia. The Columbus Museum has an enormous collection at their institution because after she passed away, her sister gave archival information, several works on paper, a couple of paintings to the Columbus Museum. And they decided that it was time for them to organize an exhibition. And the curator there, my co-curator on this project, Jonathan Walls, he contacted me and said, I'd like to think about having you write for the catalog. And I said, but how about we be partners and have the exhibition here as well? So that conversation started many years ago, about 2017, and we've been working together ever since.
Well, once again, the Chrysler has done an awesome job of bringing to life an artist's work, but more importantly, highlighting the human element in the art world. Okay, I have one last question to ask you, because we were reminiscing ahead, and you remember one of the first questions I asked you, what, 6 years ago?
That's
what
right.
was the question and what's the answer?
So the question was about an exhibition that we had here called Saints and Dragons, which was about Russian Orthodox icons. And I went with a coworker of mine to your studio, and we had a delightful conversation about the exhibition. And then you popped the question, which one of you is the saint and which one of you is the dragon?
And your answer?
I'm the dragon, of course.
Continue setting the world on fire. Thank God. The exhibit runs when to when?
So it's open now and it runs until October 3rd, and then it will travel to 3 other venues. It'll travel to Washington, D.C., Phillips Collection, Nashville, Tennessee, at the Frisk Museum, and then it'll close at the Columbus Museum in Georgia.
Awesome. I hope to be able to come back and have some smaller conversations with you about little tidbits throughout the time the show runs. So let's stay in touch.
I do that. Nice to talk to you.
Good talking to you. Keep in mind, stay safe and stay connected. See you next time.